Diablo 4 has launched amazingly well, but how well? Depending on who you ask, Diablo 4 is either the best game or the worst game ever made. Obviously, the answer lies somewhere in between, so we're gonna look at the data to see how well Diablo 4 is doing so far, and how that compares to Path of Exile, Diablo Immortal, and Diablo 3. This video will explore those relationships as well as definitively answer the question, are seasons what's best for Diablo 4? Seasons are a contentious topic in the Diablo 4 community right now, as it's attracted a lot of players new to the genre who aren't quite familiar with the now 20-year-old ARPG custom. Diablo 2 started seasons in 2003, and Path of Exile and Diablo 3 improved upon them a decade later. First, let's compare Diablo 4 to the franchise's previous entry, Diablo Immortal. If we look at this chart here, we can see the amount of interest Diablo Immortal generated when it was announced in 2018. We can also see the interest garnered when it was launched around 4 years later in 2022. This was the first new Diablo game in 10 years. Fans were starving for a new entry into the franchise. However, shortly after Diablo Immortal's release, its popularity had already fallen below that of its decade-old sibling, Diablo 3. Diablo Immortal would fall behind Candy Crush even sooner, maintaining its lead there for only about a month. Perhaps most surprising though was that even the now 2 decades old Diablo 2 appeared to be much more popular than Diablo Immortal just 1 month after Diablo Immortal's launch. Even though the game was free and everyone apparently had phones, Blizzard struggled to get players to play the game, let alone to keep them playing it. The media had a lot of guesses as to why that was, and it was pretty well documented by, well, everyone at the time. It wasn't all bad news for Blizzard. It's reported the game made around $500 million in its first 11 months, putting it on this list here. While it took Diablo Immortal 11 months to hit $500 million in revenue, Diablo 4 hit $666 million in revenue in just 5 days. Diablo 4 did in 5 days what Diablo Immortal couldn't do in an entire year. When developers make good games for PC and console, they are still heavily rewarded for it. In this graph, we can see Diablo Immortal's launch in blue and Diablo 4's launch in red. Diablo 4 achieved over 7 times the interest that Diablo Immortal did. I see you sitting there smiling at this information, and I respect that. All this to say that Diablo 4 is doing amazing compared to its most recent predecessor, Diablo Immortal, and I don't think that we have to worry about the Diablo franchise going purely mobile anytime in the near future. But what about other ARPGs? Let's talk about Diablo 3, Path of Exile, and how they compare to Diablo 4. Before that, let's talk about whether seasons are the best thing for Diablo 4. But first, while we're on the topic, if you enjoy mobile games, maybe step into the world of our sponsor, Bloodlines: Heroes of Lithis, a stunning hero collector fantasy RPG. In this 3D adventure, you'll construct your kingdom and gather champions to protect it and the entire world. But here's where the magic truly begins. By combining bloodlines like elves, demons, demigods, dragonborn, vampires, and more, you can forge your very own legendary champions. With its innovative air system and breathtaking visuals, Bloodlines takes RPGs and gacha gameplay to a new level. Download and try the game for free using my link or scan the QR code and receive an amazing starter pack worth $20. New fantasy characters with unique abilities for each gender are released every 2 weeks. And check out the Bloodline that was just released. The Goatfolk Stone Throwers, who originated in the lands of Dragonborn and became the finest marksmen. New characters can be obtained not only by summoning but also by breeding with companions and capturing prisoners. Customize your champions by marrying any 2 bloodlines to create over 1,000 fantasy hybrids and endless possibilities for your lineups and matchmaking strategies. Hybrids inherit not only the talents and traits of their parents, but also their unique appearances passed down from each family tree and fused into one. All players can obtain uniquely designed hybrid champions, Bloodcraft Legends, by earning points in seasonal guild wars. Download the game now for free on both Android and iOS. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code being shown on screen right now to get a starter pack worth $20, including 1 summoning crystal, 100,000 gold, and 100 diamonds. The first 30 players to leave their in-game account ID and username in the pinned comment below will receive a free Legendary Orc Champion, Ugrull, one of the best warriors to carry you in the game. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the video. Now let's answer the question, are seasons what's best for Diablo 4? Diablo 4 just announced its first season, and a lot of new players are confused by seasons. I'm seeing a lot of people who are angry about the prospect of having to start over every few months. So I thought it would be interesting to compare the success of 2 great ARPGs, one that has had great seasons and one that kind of didn't, so we can see the impact on player retention and player growth over time. We'll be comparing Path of Exile to Diablo 3, the 2 heavy hitters in the genre before Diablo 4's arrival. Path of Exile took seasons seriously and made it part of its genetic makeup. Diablo 3 really didn't, especially in the first few years. And who can forget double goblins. So let's take a look at how that affected their respective player bases over time. Here you can see Diablo 3's launch, which to anyone that's ever looked at one of these graphs before knows that this is pretty much how any successful game launch looks. If you know of a AAA game that had a successful launch that looks different than this, I'd love to see it. I'm genuinely curious. Now, Diablo 3 broke all kinds of records, including becoming the fastest selling PC game of all time. It was a massive success for Blizzard, but for some reason, after an initially successful launch, Blizzard seemed to jump out of the gate and land flat-footed. There would be a massive lull in content. There were patches, but Diablo 3 didn't take advantage of the seasonal approach its predecessor, Diablo 2, had found success with 10 years prior. To make matters rougher for Diablo 3, it wouldn't be until 2 years after the launch in 2014 that it finally got its first expansion, Reaper of Souls. Reaper of Souls was a massive win for Diablo 3. It remedied and improved a lot of things that the players had issues with and brought a lot of life back into the game. But still, Diablo 3 wouldn't have seasons until the end of 2014, which was then about 2.5 years after its launch. Now let's compare that to Path of Exile, which was in a lot of ways a non-official sequel to Diablo 2. At the very least, it was a Diablo-like. Path of Exile oddly had more interest in its open beta in January of 2013 than it did in its launch in October of 2013 that same year. This wasn't a great sign for the budding ARPG, but Path of Exile wasted no time starting its leagues, with its first Anarchy and Onslaught leagues beginning while the game was still in its beta phase in 2013. Side by side, the difference in popularity at launch of these two games was night and day. Diablo being launched by a AAA company with a nearly untouchable lineage of games to its name, and Path of Exile, an indie developer with no games to its name. You can see how much more popular Diablo 3's launch was than Path of Exile's. Add to that you actually had to pay for Diablo 3 while Path of Exile was free to play, and it really brings to light how impressive the Diablo 3 launch was. See that tiny red bump in the middle? That was POE's beta, which garnered more attention than its launch. The little red bump at the end. Now, while you're looking at this, remember the difference between Diablo 3's launch and Path of Exile's launch, because it's a testament to the power of seasons and leagues. Without seasons, the Diablo 3 community didn't really have a reason to stick around, and within 1 year, Diablo 3 had lost that massive lead and was trading places with the new indie game, Path of Exile. Diablo would take a sizable lead with its Reaper of Souls expansion and hold that lead for about a year. But after that, Path of Exile was back in the fight with its Free Awakening expansion, which would add Act 4 to the game. Seeing the success Path of Exile was having with its seasons, or leagues as it calls them, Diablo 3 finally started doing the seasons its predecessor Diablo 2 had introduced to the genre back in 2003, over a decade prior. Here's an interesting bit of lore for a frame of reference on how much the genre has changed over the years. In Diablo 2's second season, Blizzard hosted a race to max level to celebrate the oncoming release of World of Warcraft in 2004. The winner would get a signed copy of WoW, among other things. Guess how long it took the winner to get to max level in Diablo 2? 50 days. Yes, playing non-stop, it took the winner an entire 50 days to hit max level. It was a different time. Almost no one ever reached max level in Diablo 2. Leveling was largely the point of Diablo 2. It didn't have an endgame. Leveling was the endgame. If you're wondering what class it was, well, veterans of the game can probably guess. It was a sorceress, of course. Then Season 2 would add the now famous rune words to the game. We haven't seen these in Diablo 4 yet, but something tells me that we will see them arrive during a season or an expansion in the not too distant future. It just makes too much sense not to, doesn't it? For a long time, Diablo 3's seasons would do little more than reset the board, similar to its predecessor. Everyone made new characters and worked to unlock new rewards, but usually nothing substantial about the game really changed outside of the occasional addition of a handful of new legendaries. On the contrary, Path of Exile seasons were adding substantial amounts of content and changes to the game each time. They would add new acts, new bosses, and entirely new systems, allowing it to dethrone Diablo 3 as the most active ARPG community from 2016 to 2023. Path of Exile wasn't quite a household name like Diablo 3, but it had more people playing it than Diablo. How was this indie game able to surpass the titan that created the genre known as Diablo-likes, the very franchise that invented it? The answer is clear. It was leagues, occurring almost every 3 months on the dot like clockwork. So if you're one of the people moaning and complaining about seasons or leagues, my biggest piece of advice is give them a try. We have literal decades of evidence that suggests this is the best way to maintain and to grow an ARPG player base. And Path of Exile was built with a fraction of the marketing budget and a fraction of the development budget of Diablo. Just imagine what Diablo 4 will be capable of if Blizzard puts its back into it. Rumors had it that Blizzard's upper management wasn't happy with the reception of Diablo 3 and gave up on it pretty fast, deciding that instead of continuing to invest heavily in Diablo 3 seasons and expansions, they would look to fix the franchise with Diablo 4. By the way, have you liked the video or subbed to the channel? Doing so will definitely increase your chances of finding a Shaco or a Headhunter at the same time. Anyway, Diablo 4 is here. How's it doing? How does it compare to other ARPGs? Well, Diablo 4 finally launched on June 6th. Actually, let's be real, it launched on June 1st. There were millions of people playing it on June 1st. Why are we pretending that it launched on June 6th? Regardless of which date you pick, this launch dwarfed that of Diablo 3 and Path of Exile, becoming Blizzard's fastest selling game of all time. Diablo 1 sold over 2.5 million copies globally. Diablo 2 sold over 4 million copies as of 2001 and sold over 5 million additional copies of Diablo 2 Resurrected by 2022. And Diablo 4 made 666 million in the first 5 days, which puts it at likely over 8 million copies sold in just those first 5 days, and likely quite a bit more than that now. Path of Exile's launch was able to get 3.7 million free downloads in its first year, according to Chris Wilson's post from 2013. Certainly, free downloads are a lot easier to amass. Still, 3.7 is an insanely respectable number for any company, let alone an indie dev. What does this all mean? Well, Blizzard once again proved that the Diablo name is still carrying a lot of weight in the community. When they want to dominate the market, they can. By all accounts, Diablo 4 is a massive financial success already, and it's only just begun. The fight isn't over, far from it. Longtime ARPG fans know that ARPGs are more of a marathon than a sprint. They are looking forward to the future, wondering how Blizzard is going to support Diablo post-launch this time. They remember the lack of content and the lack of seasons Diablo 3 got. They remember looking at Path of Exile's leagues with NB and wondering, what if Blizzard had done that with Diablo 3? Well, it would seem Blizzard is not content to make those same mistakes twice, coming out of the gate with its first season a mere 6 weeks after the game's launch. This is not the same Blizzard ideology that ran Diablo 3. Things have changed. Interestingly, the Season 1 announcement felt a little unprepared. I think they undersold it a bit as a result. We can probably chalk this up to the fact that it's their first season and they are already working around the clock trying to implement bug fixes and quality of life changes the community's been asking for. It showed the same 5-second clip of a low-level character on repeat and then glossed over what are likely the most interesting parts of the season, like the entirely new boss fight, the 6 new uniques, the 7 new legendaries, and the 32 new heart gems. From what I can tell, it looks like Diablo 4 Season 1 is actually going to be pretty good and substantially more interesting than any of the Diablo 3 seasons, save for perhaps the last one that happened just before the Diablo 4 launch. Dare I even say that this might be on par with a Path of Exile League? Diablo 4 Season 1 reminds me a lot of Path of Exile's Abyss League. It's got heart gems that you find off of the mobs like Abyss League. It's got random tunnels that you can find and fight your way through like Abyss League. Reminding me a lot of a Path of Exile League is honestly the biggest compliment I could give a Diablo 4 season right now, because Path of Exile has certainly set the bar for seasonal content and had leveraged that bar to dethrone Diablo 3. Right now, Diablo 4 is well in the lead, and it's Diablo 4's lead to lose. Diablo 4's success moving forward is going to come down to the size and the scope of the seasons to follow. As you might have guessed, I've got thousands of hours in both Diablo and Path of Exile. I'm a Diablo fan, and I'm a Path of Exile fan. And let's not forget, when companies compete, consumers win. Competition keeps them honest, and it keeps them innovating. The last thing we want is one ARPG dominating the genre, so if you're a fanboy for one side or the other, remember, your favorite ARPG is only as good as it is because of the competition it faces. At the end of the day, I think this is a rising tide lifts all boats type of situation anyway. Having multiple good ARPGs bringing players into the genre only serves to increase the player base size of both games, evidenced by the fact that Diablo 4's massive popularity between its beta and its launch didn't destroy Path of Exile, but instead made a lot of players realize they wanted more of the genre. And Path of Exile went on to have its most popular season yet, right here in 2023, moments after the beta and before the launch of D4. But to again put the Diablo franchise's power into perspective, Diablo 4's beta was more popular than Path of Exile's most popular season. season. Diablo 4's launch was many times more popular than Path of Exile's most popular season. There is something about this franchise that appeals to an insane number of players. The only question is, will Blizzard fight to retain those players this time? Two things are for certain. One, Blizzard is already trying 10 times harder to retain those players than they did with D3. And two, if you still think leagues or seasons are bad for an ARPG, well, you simply haven't been paying attention. Let me know your thoughts on season and leagues. Who does it better? And when do you think runewords are coming to Diablo 4? During the next season? During the next expansion? Thanks for watching. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up and sub to the channel for more ARPG content. You can catch me streaming Diablo 4 daily over at twitch.tv/luckyghost. Massive shout out to my YouTube members. To join, click the join button below to support the channel and get access to a private Discord channel and behind the scenes footage and more. If you're not sure what to do next, maybe check out one of the videos popping up on screen right now.